today and sharing your thoughts. As a parent of a first grader in the Lebanon Special School District, can you share with us the literacy experiences that you have observed this year with your child in regards to learning to read?
Okay, well, what I find interesting is that we actually have two first graders, because I have twins, boy-girl twins, and it's amazing to see because they are different in every aspect of their lives. I even said even when they were babies, they smell different, even though I wash, their clothes and their bodies and everything the same. But it's been neat to see them learn and how they learn. One is definitely more visual, one is more hands-on, but it's been interesting to see that what they have been doing very similarly is within the language and literacy program and all of that, they have done just excelled very greatly in sounding out their words and sounding out their letters. Last year in kindergarten, I started around Christmas time getting a little concerned because when my now third grader was in kindergarten, about Christmas was when he had mastered his 100 sight words and was starting to do reading for AR points. And I clicked in my head like, wait, this isn't the same. We're not doing this. And I knew that they had talked about a different language literacy program that had started, I guess, maybe the year before that. And so also in my head, I was thinking, okay, but this is also a weird year because we have COVID and, how are things going? And so I was, didn't know, are they not progressing as fast because of just learning differently? They were in preschool before, so they were in a pre-K program. And of course, they didn't have that second half, which is so important before getting into kindergarten. So I thought, well, maybe that's it. Maybe they weren't necessarily born early, so I don't know that there's any of that, and as a parent, I just started, noticing the differences and thinking, oh, goodness. And I talked to their kindergarten teacher, of course, and, she reminded me of the differences in the program and how things had changed and said, they'll get it. And she said, just wait. She said, when, it'll click, and when it clicks, it'll all be there. So I said, okay, and I kept having to remind myself, okay. And it was funny because even talking to other parents there's a lot of us that have kids that are that same age, and talking to them, we were all had that little bit of concern, like, well, we're not reading like we were, and even letters, it was just all a different approach. And I kept saying, okay, but I've talked. We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay, And so it's been interesting to see. And then really, I don't know when it hit, obviously sometime in that spring semester when all of a sudden it was like, okay, they've got it. They know what they're doing. And and that's great. I grew up in Wilson County Schools on phonics program, so I don't know any different. And I don't know that the learning, I don't know, I was in the era of the Hooked on Phonics stuff that they sold on TV that we thought was great. So I was excited to learn that was the program, but then now that I'm seeing my kids learn it, it's really good. And I love that we get sent home every week, typically, our spelling words, and there's a tricky word in there, and their teacher does a really good job with the tricky words. I don't know if that's part of the curriculum, but helping them come up with ways to remember that. Like this week is wood, W-O-L-D, and they make sure to say, not the kind of wood you build a house with. And it's the way for them to help remember is W-O-U, lucky duck. W-O-U-L-D. I'm like, okay, so that makes sense. So I don't know, if even that's part of all of that, but just going through those spelling words and that the spelling words correlate with the books the book they're reading, and that correlates with the other, how it all relates together, I think is neat too. Because then it's just repetitive over and over and over, and I like that, and that's how I learn best too. So
definitely. What specifically have you noticed about the teaching of foundational skills, such as the sounds first approach to learning, sounding out words, decoding words, decodable readers, that kind of thing?
Okay. Well, I mentioned my older son, and he started out doing the sight words, and that was great for him. He's good now. He's a great memorizer also. So it's are we learning it or have we memorized it? But he's getting better at that. But he was always really good with spelling words, spelling test. Very interested in reading, wanted to read as early as he possibly could. And so that came very easy for him. And that was such a huge blessing. And then, like I mentioned before, our other ones, it took a little bit longer. But what now is interesting, and this is what I've told several other people, is that when you compare them, now you have to remember, one's in third grade, two are in first grade, and, that's different. But when it comes down to sounding out words, my third grader can't do it as well as the first graders at all. And if you sat down and asked him, he could probably go through a little bit, but just because he knows what those words are. But it definitely, if you put him to a test, they could beat him out faster probably almost every time, which is interesting to see. And of course it just drives him nuts because he's older and he reads better and and he reads on a 4th grade level, but he's a 3rd grader. But it is interesting to see that.
Definitely.
And even within spelling, it's been interesting because they're all great at spelling test and they're all good at that approach. But like I said, my older one is very good at memorizing too.
Right.
So, and we've noticed that with multiplication tables now too, the memorizing.
Yes.
But if they're all writing down, the boys like to write stories and make comic books and that kind of stuff. And it's interesting to see when they're writing the stories out. Of course, they ask me how to spell things and do that. But when they're not, it's interesting to see that our 1st grader is spelling the words better than our 3rd grader. Which to me, I'm like, come on. I get his papers home and I'm like, what in the world? Like, come on, you know how to spell this, And he's like, I'm just doing it fast so I can. And I'm like, no. So, but that's been the greatest difference is seeing that. And knowing that this will help them further along, I love this time or this approach and this age because I love like we're driving down the street and they're all trying to like sound out. They see signs and sometimes it's signs we don't want. It's kind of like, okay, like
okay,
let's go past that one. Like, but I love that because I love hearing the that approach to it. So that's been exciting.
Yes, most definitely. What are your feelings about the reading curriculum being used this year with regards to this year and other years? And I know you kind of touched upon
obviously, I really love it. I mean, I would have never thought I'd be like, oh, this is gung ho, woo, 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 but it really, truly has been good. And my 2 younger ones, the 1st graders, were the ones that just going into school, it being different. They had never been in school until the COVID year of not knowing how things were going to go and started out, of course, virtual. Even their first day of kindergarten, their teacher was virtual for the first week. So, it was one of those, like, how was this all going to go? And for the fact of it was a crazy year, but it just all works, and it did, it clicked and they're reading and love it and enjoy it. And, not all the time do they want to do it if they're made, but yeah, I can't say enough good about it.
Good.
So
Wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to add or comment on?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's just one of those, I don't know, I appreciate being able to talk about it. But like I said, it's even kind of silly talking, but I appreciate being able to talk about it because I do notice the difference. And like I said, it was the difference at first that made me concerned. And now it's the difference now that makes me eager and excited to see that and for other parents to know that too, especially parents that have the ones that maybe have gone through the program differently with sight words and that kind of thing. Versus now with the phonics-based stuff. So, I mean, because it was a little scary. I mean, I think all of us were kind of like, wait, what? Like we just had these kids and they just did this and they just, and they have words, that they need to look at and all the tricky words in their folder and that kind of stuff, but just not like we had before, So, but no.
That's exciting. I know several teachers have shared, just trusting the process, and I think
and that's what it was. It was totally having to trust the process and know that when it happens, it happens, and it'll be good. And it did. It really was almost, I don't want to say overnight, because obviously, but it really was all of a sudden this thing, and coincidentally enough, they both clicked at the same time. So I don't know if that was, a class thing, if that was a, or if that was just how that was, so, but.
Well, thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.